Hey guys, welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are actually taking a look at a budget style game compilation. It was released around 2002-2003 by the name of All Star Racing. This game now was actually released towards the end of the PlayStation's life cycle, and again it's a budget kind of based title. It's also created by the same developers that made other games similar to this here by the name of All Star Action and Stock Car Racer. I actually have done previous videos on both of those games, so I'll actually make sure to drop links down in the description so that you can also check them out and you can see how similar they actually are. The main thing that you'll notice straight away by actually watching those other videos is the similarities between the actual gameplay styles and the aesthetics of each of these games. Pretty much the racing parts of it are pretty much carbon copies of what's actually in this game as well. They took a lot of the models and even a lot of the tracks from those other games and literally just pasted them into this here. So what they primarily done is this game actually is based around 4 different game modes or racing modes. You actually have Supercar Challenge, Stock Car Frenzy, GT Racer and Classic Cars. The only real disappointment really with this game is the fact is, like, the game does actually have potential in its own right and it could have been made into like a better type game, because this game didn't get great reviews due to likes of, if it just feels like a cheap kind of like knockoff style game where the developers really didn't put too much into it, because again, like I said, they just copied and pasted a lot of elements that they had done from previous games. But the fact is, the game doesn't feel like a whole game. Like, each of the game modes primarily, they try to break it down into their own individual game, which kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, because when you compare it to games of today where they actually have likes of the racing aesthetics, but there are even the game modes are all broken down where they actually do have different categories of types of cars, but they're all part of the same game. They don't try to break them down into separate games. But another issue with the game as well is that each of those separate games or game modes, if you will, they're very limited in terms of what's actually on offer. It's pretty much the same thing over and over again. Like, there's no campaign, it's literally just single player races, and you're limited to say maybe 2 tracks, maybe 3 tracks each, and you've only got a handful of cars, maybe 1 to 2, maybe 3 cars to race on as well for the most part. And most of the game modes you don't really have access to really much of the cars. As you can see here on the classic cars, all you've got access to is 2 cars and there's only a selection of 2 tracks, which is not really good in terms if you wanted to play a game that you want to have something that provides value that you can keep coming back to time and again. Like, for what it is, like, there's nothing wrong in actually how it plays. Yeah, it is fairly simplistic and it is basic to its core to what it is, and the graphics are actually okay, but it could have been a lot better, and they could have added a lot more into it. Like, they could have added like championships, like maybe an arcade mode, like time trials, or a couple of different gameplay modes, even multiplayer. The handling, although not great, it still plays. You can definitely play it, but it's more of a casual game. There's definitely no longevity in this type of game, and even if you go back to the likes of the previous games, as I mentioned, like the All Star Action, that has like a ton of games on it, like all different game modes, like from futuristic race and even to like water sports. But the likes of some of those game elements are pretty much irrelevant because they're not really easy to play or pick up, and they don't make a lot of sense. The racing sections are the best part of that game as well, but it's primarily anything you see in this game is already in that game as well, and even in the future sequels as well. I will be doing another video on All Star Racing 2, make sure to keep an eye out for that as well. And it essentially, it is more of the same. They have added more into the game in the sequel, but it still kind of leaves a lot to questions pretty much to be asked as to why the game, they just keep reusing the same stuff, which in a lot of ways is kind of a letdown. Which it could have been, if more time and more effort had been put into it, it could have potentially been a decent enough game. Now the game itself, it got mixed to like low enough reviews, which is a pity when you compare it to a lot of other games that were on the PlayStation at the time. Even a lot of other budget friendly titles actually did have a lot more to offer to their audience compared to this. But it's not to say that it's a terrible game. There is some kind of highlights to it, but it's not something that you would want to play short term. But at the same time, people do obviously play it because they see a lot of other videos on YouTube with other people playing it, so clearly somebody gets enjoyment out of playing it. And like I said, it's not the worst racing game I've ever played in the world. Like, you can actually play it. The tracks, even as limited as they are, they're actually decent, they're well laid out. The handling of the cars, even though it can be a little bit fiddly, once you master it, it's actually okay. The only other, like, apart from all these games, the stock car racer game that I've actually done a previous video on actually does have more elements. You're racing the same type of cars, but it does have more tracks. So there's definitely a little bit more longevity in that game compared to some of these other games. But all in all, it's not a downright terrible game. Like, you can have a little bit of a playthrough with it and try and get some enjoyment out of it to some degree. But it's just not as good compared to some other games that would be on the PlayStation. But again, it's a budget title, and a lot of these games were developed back towards the end of the PlayStation, and you see it with modern consoles as well. When they come to the end of the lifespan too, it is a good entry point for developers with very limited budgets and literally skill sets to be able to come in and try and create something, and at least understand the process of how to develop games for a platform, which is good. But again, there could have been a way to actually make this probably a little bit better, but it is what it is, and it is what you make of it. It's totally up to you. Like, games are there to be played regardless of how good or bad they are, but it's not great, but it's not ideally terrible either. I know other people may disagree with that, but again, everybody's opinions are different, and it is what you make of it at the end of the day. But if you are interested in playing these quirkier style of games, even if they're not the best in the world, but you do get some enjoyment out of them, I would definitely just have a look. Even if you want to play it for a few minutes here and there and just see what you think of it, go and check it out if you haven't done so already. So I would love to know your thoughts on this game, if you actually have played it or did you own it back in the day, and what are your thoughts or stories behind it. Did you enjoy it, or maybe not so much? Be sure to share it down in the comments below. So if you have liked this video, be sure to leave a like. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel, and make sure to hit the bell icon to be updated of future videos, as I am going to be exploring a lot more of these unusual and quirky style games that were released on the PlayStation, and share my thoughts and opinions with everyone. So as always, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.